You're absolutely right about that. My question will be, and I know there was a bite here from Ryan Russillo who mentioned this. Let's play this. This is from the Ringer podcast with Bill Simmons and Ryan Russillo. This is what Russillo and Bill Simmons were talking about.
Can you think of anything where, if you're the Lakers, you go, now I have to think about this a little bit?
Embiid?
That's something the Lakers would traditionally do.
Talk about get out of jail free cards.
I think the Sixers will do it in a second.
We'll give you all of our expirings and a first, and we'll get you out of the Joel Embiid business. Here's your get out of jail free card right now. You don't have to deal with them anymore.
So he's saying, and then a little bit later on in that, he mentions, I know the Sixers were interested in trading Embiid at the deadline, which can't be true because they were not allowed to trade Embiid at the deadline because of his extension rules. So, now they can trade him. So my question is, were people calling him and saying, hey, would you be interested in trading Embiid in the offseason, yada, yada. But the thing he threw out, hey, would the Lakers take him, give you all their expiring? So I guess the question I have is, are you interested in a deal that doesn't make you better, it just wipes Embiid off the books? So my point is, if you're Daryl Morey and you are basically saying, look, you need to get this right, trading Embiid for expirings and a number one, I don't think helps you get it right.
Not in the short term, no. But do they want to get out of the Joel Embiid business, as they just, put it? It depends on the conversations that are being had between Daryl Morey and Josh Harris. Is Daryl Morey here for the next 3 to 5 years? Right? Or is he maybe on the hot seat? That's the difference between making that type of move and not making it. So I don't know if you're interested in getting out of the Joel Embiid business for nothing in the short term, right? But I don't even know if the Lakers – I can't see the Lakers wanting Joel Embiid for that. Forget the Sixers wanting to do it. It's a fun hypothetical.
This is me, and I know I'm probably in the minority here. I think fans and people are more worried about Embiid than the Sixers are.
I don't know, man. I probably, but let me just add, you're right, but that doesn't mean the Sixers aren't worried.
They might be, but I feel like look. The whole thing was a mess this year. The season got off the rails. Now he hasn't played since, when was the last time he played a game? I think all that time off.
He needs to bounce back in a big way, MG.
Yeah, I agree. But my point is, I think Sixers fans are just so tired of him and the whole problem, and he's always hurt and yada, 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 that it's manifested bigger than maybe the problem actually is.
I don't know, man. I hope you're right with that, because that would mean, hopefully he bounces back in a MVP type of way this year. But you look at the track record, fans are a little bit oversensitive, sure, and we're a little bit irrational, sure, but it's not that irrational when you look at his track record.
I agree. I'm not saying it's irrational. I'm just saying I believe that, and I think I'm in the minority.
Probably. Yeah, probably.
And that's going off of no authority. Nobody has said to me, hey, Embiid's fine, he'll be okay. I just personally think that this whole knee thing is being made a much bigger deal than it will end up being. That's just my personal thought.
But if we're Daryl Morey, do you sell with the little bit of stock that he has remaining? Or let's go glass half empty here. It is as bad as some of the biggest worriers are thinking it is, right? Like, it's worse than we think. And he comes back this year, he's a shell of himself. He misses 53 games, and it's a mess again.
Disaster.
You have no trade. You can't trade him at all now with this contract. So do you try and sell a little bit high if you're Daryl Morey?
Hey, Morey's in a tough spot because that bite that we played last week from Brian Windhorst, do we have that bite handy, or is that not in the system right now? The Windhorst bite last week when he said they're both back, in part because ownership was on board with the decisions that Morey made. Well, if you say you're back, what's your plan? I'm giving you the benefit of the doubt because I agreed with you last year. Now what? And you say, I'm bringing Embiid and George back. We're going to run it back. If I'm the owner, I say, okay, here's what Windhorst said, by the way.
I was mildly surprised, but I heard that, ownership was on board and agreed with and endorsed, signed off, whatever you want to call it, with the moves that they made last year. And the two big ones are obviously signing Paul George and extending Joel Embiid. Josh Harris, David Blitzer, it wasn't like Daryl Morey went to them and said, this is what we have to do. No doubt, we got to do it. And they disagreed. They were on board with it.
So they were on board with it. So now it's like, hey, we listened to you. We're on board. What's your plan now? You have no room for error. You can't say, hey, I'm bringing those two guys back. We're going to run it back with those guys. Now ownership says, fine, if that's your plan, but if it doesn't work out, now you're gone.
That's insinuating, though. It's interesting that Wendy used mildly surprised that ownership was on board, because that's insinuating that Daryl Morey went to them with a PowerPoint presentation saying, hey, this is what we got to do. Whereas it's more likely that they were in unison of ownership saying, no, we want to do this.
I think they did. Look, if you're the owner and you don't need to be sold on this, you don't say, Dr. J, get on a plane and fly to L.A. and take your shoes off.
That wasn't Morey's idea.
Exactly.
Right.
That's why Morey's not fired. They're not looking at Morey and saying, you told us to do this. No, they're saying, we all wanted to do this.
Maybe. I think it's more 60-40 ownership went to Morey saying, hey, I think we should do this, and Morey agreed.
Well, and this is what Morey had said. That's why we had to sign Joel, because we had to have him locked up to convince George to come here, because he wouldn't have come here had Embiid's future been in limbo.
And Russillo and Bill Simmons, they mentioned they phrased it, get out of the Joel Embiid business. How much are they going to be looking to get out of the Paul George business, right?
I think they're more inclined to get out of the Paul George business than they are the Embiid business. You got to keep in mind.
There's no ties there.